go and we run to the corporation. We're not ready. We're not ready to do that business yet. It's like, is that how you would handle your business? And I don't buy into the reason that we're all volunteers, because we're not. We're here to learn and grow, and we're in an education organization. So how can we do it better? And that's what I ask myself. So I think it's really important to begin as you intend to continue. So to have the plan and have the plan laid out. Given that you're leaders in your district, I want to talk a bit first of what the district needs to do, in my opinion, and it's certainly not cast in concrete, but it's up for discussion of how each district will do this. But some things to consider. That when we go to a corporation to talk about the Toastmasters program, we need to have the structure in place at the district level to support a corporate program, which is not going to look very much like a community club at all. There's different motivation. We talk about it differently. In other words, we sell it differently. The structure and the way it's integrated into the workplace would be very different than a corporate club, or rather than a community-based club. So just backing again out of that a bit and looking at some subsection points for that in terms of the district being ready. We need to start with, well, that's my language, and something to consider. Are all the area, division, and district team aware of how different corporate programs are going to be handled? And do they know how to support them? So there's lots and lots of information to go through and to change that paradigm regarding corporate programs. You'll notice I call them programs, not clubs. And there's a reason for that, and I'll talk about that later. So you really need to set up the district. I like to consider that the district ideally would set up a corporate liaison section under the club growth director, possibly the program quality as well, and certainly under the district director, that deals specifically with corporate programs. Somebody that's super comfortable in the corporate world, loves to go in there, is super comfortable talking to a CEO or the head of HR or the head of learning, and can talk the corporate speak. The second thing to think about in terms of that liaison group and the area division district team being versed is, how do you, when we start to ask these programs to come to officer training, well, it wouldn't be called officer training for them, but coming to outside events, my experience is that most of them don't come. And I wouldn't either, because most of them come to club officer training or TLIs and there's nothing there for them. The conversation doesn't relate to their corporate environment or what they're learning or taking away for Toastmasters or their motivation. And often their roles could be very different inside the corporation. So we need to look at, as a district, how do we set up training or support for these roles in the corporate programs? My suggestion is that we look at it as leadership training and have them meet together so that they can discuss the pros and cons, what's going on, their strengths and weaknesses, and share that with one another. And so depending on how many corporate programs you have in your district, you could have those in combined in areas together so that they could support one another. You could also, it gives a unique opportunity for corporate program people to perhaps take on the area or division role because it's an environment that they're familiar with. Okay. So look at the support that we give the corporate programs. I think also that when I go through this, I just want to put a sidebar in here. When I go through this, everything is all tied in together, and so it's challenging to pull it apart. So I may repeat myself or go back and forth, but I think those are some of the things to really be aware of as a district to prepare. How are you going to train them ongoing? What would bring them out, and putting them together perhaps in areas and or divisions if that's possible. Finding a way to bring them together, and perhaps there's special training for them that's separate under the corporate liaison team that would do that. And having your corporate liaison team train your club, not your club, but your program sponsors, mentors, and support people that would go into corporate environment. Because as soon as you have an area director go in to a corporate program where the roles perhaps have been changed, and I'll talk about that in a while, and they start talking about doing a membership drive and getting your dues paid, this would now be foreign language to the corporate program that I'm proposing. So everybody needs to be on board and know what's going on. Okay. So that's some of the things that are really important for the district, in my viewpoint, to look at and putting in place ahead of time so that we're ready to do this. You can do this in terms of current corporate clubs that aren't working, or if one person or two people are working their selves to absolute exhaustion to keep a corporate club functioning. And that's often the success of a club in a corporation, is that when there's one or two people who work for that corporation who make it their personal mission to keep that club functioning. And my proposal or theory or ideas take it to a different place. So it's not up to one person. It's not up to Pat to keep the program going in the corporation where I work. Okay. So some things to do in mindsets really before we arrive to make a sales call, or what I call an enrollment, because there's really no sales to this. It's enrolling people in the benefits of what goes on in their corporation and how they can integrate the Toastmaster program or curriculum into their environment. So some basic qualifications, first of all, that I would look at. I would consider, and these have been published by Toastmasters throughout the years, but I look at a minimum of 200 employees who are on site and not shift workers. If there's shift workers or there's virtual workers, that's also can be considered, but you may need more of a base for employees. And there's always exceptions, okay? You really need to be very clear when you go in and meet with the person who is interested in having Toastmasters in that organization. Personally, I'm not interested in going in and meeting with the Toastmaster who wants to have a club in that, have a Toastmaster program in that organization. I want them to have reached out, made contact with one of the decision makers who's willing to either be the corporate champion or identify a corporate champion. It's one of the main things where we need to start, in my opinion, that I find works, where I have a senior person who is not necessarily involved in Toastmasters, but has some say over what kind of training takes place in the organization. So it's not depending on the members, but the corporation is making a commitment. And it may be the very same person who signs the agreement or contract with Toastmasters that is currently called application to form a Toastmaster club, but hopefully will be renamed in the future. So they're actually signing a contract. when I go in, I'm prepared to talk about that contract and the conditions of that contract, as well as what kind of a information session would we have in terms of promoting that program in their corporation. I talk to that decision maker when I'm in there to meet with them. I talk about the requirements that are necessary for us to have a contract with them. And I treat it like a contract. And I want everybody involved in that contract to have integrity in the process. So I'm very clear that they have to have a minimum of 12 sessions or program sessions a year, and that they're much more likely to have success because it's a skill-based training program if they have it weekly. I'm just upfront about that. I talk about when during the day they want to schedule it, and I'm not particularly interested in them fitting it into lunch hours and after work. I want it to be a bona fide training program in their training department. And so I want to negotiate with them regarding time for their employees to attend this valuable training. I talk about the requirements of the participants to show up and participate because it is skill building. I talk about the importance and the contract being that as the provider of the curriculum, which Toastmasters is, that our requirement to be there is that they have a minimum of 20 participants in the program at all times. And that when that fails to be, that they're actually they're in violation of our contract. So this is how I do business with every other person that arrives in my office to sell me training. They have requirements, and we need to have requirements as well. I also talk to them about the fact that people who take on the leadership roles within this program are required to attend leadership training, which might involve evening or weekend time. And how do they want to deal with that in their corporation? So I'm upfront. I also let them know that there's future leadership opportunities outside of that program in terms of the area, division, district, international levels, if the person decides to either compete as a speaker and or develop as a leader and participate at a higher level. So those are some of the things that I'm really clear about at the beginning. I also, when I'm meeting with that decision maker at the very beginning, is I talk about the benefits. And that's what I'm selling to a corporation. I have never sold public speaking to a corporation. I sell communication and leadership skills. Public speaking is not something most people want to sign up for, and most corporations, in my experience, and you may have a different one, don't sign up for that, nor are they interested in putting somebody in a year-long program for that. They, sorry about the interruption. They also know that they can get a 2-day course to come into their corporation to teach public speaking or presentation skills. So we don't want to go in that area. We want to talk about the larger field of communication and leadership. So I love to do some research ahead of time with the corporations to find out what their kind of business is and what skills they might want to learn. But right away, I find that they're looking for, certainly looking for critical thinking skills. They're looking for presentation skills. They're looking for critical listening skills, teamwork, organizational skills, feedback as a supervisor, meeting management, interpersonal skills, setting and managing goals, or strategic planning. And that's just the first wave of the transferable skills that the Toastmasters program can offer the corporation within our experiential learning environment. So that's what I talk to them about in terms of what Toastmasters has to offer them. I'm also very clear to them that the Toastmaster program is experiential. It has no pass or fail, and therefore there's no graduation day. So this is quite a foreign concept for the corporate world, because often they'll say, well, it's 10 hours of training and then you're finished, you get a certificate. Very different than Toastmasters. So we have to let them know that it's continuous and it's self-paced, so people can go as quickly or as slowly as they want. And so they also have a responsibility as an organization to engage regarding that. So if they have a performance review system, they might want to put Toastmasters into that and have expectations with their people. So I'm really clear about their roles and responsibilities. Their roles and responsibilities in terms of partnering with us include that they're actually buying a program from us, the curriculum, and we will be involved because Toastmasters has a unique delivery method. And so we're going to be on site supporting those participants in the program to through the unique delivery process, because we learn from one another. I talk about the need for them to provide a meeting space, for them to decide ahead of time how they're going to pay the tuition, how they're going to determine who participates in the program, and what their accountability will be for that, right? The other thing that is really important in terms of setting the groundwork with the corporation is to set up an expectation that every quarterly or 6 months that we would, the corporate liaison, and perhaps the leader of the Toastmaster program, who could be called the president, would meet with them and report on the progress being made in the program. So there would be a role of tracking the progress for each of the participants so that we could report out, because corporations are interested in return on investment and accountability. I'm wondering where to go next with this. I want to talk just briefly about some of the words that I change, because I really change it to corporate speak. And I want it to sound like the corporate world and how they talk about their learning and development within the corporation. I also find that this is relevant, totally relevant, and is just a straight across fit for government. So if you're looking at government-based programs or clubs, this is the same thing there for the most part in my experience. So I talk about dues, and we now call them in the corporate program tuition. It's an education program. They're signing up for a learning program at work, and it's tuition. I talk about it being leadership, communication and leadership training program. That's what Toastmasters is, communication and leadership. When we talk about TLIs or club officer training, I call that leadership training, because that's what they're going to buy. That's why they're going to show up. Club officer training will mean nothing to them if we set up, or if you choose to set up the corporate programs as I'm proposing. And there's, I mean, this is just my thoughts. There's a vast space here for you to adapt it to fit your environment, but it's part of that paradigm shift. I refer to evaluations as evaluations and or feedback, depending on what they call them in their environment. So sometimes the managers or the supervisors actually provide evaluations or feedback, and I want it to resonate with them. All of our achievements, whether it's completing paths within pathways or however we might look at it, if it's a successful club series, I talk all about that in terms of curriculum and milestones. I don't talk to them about pathways at all, because as a buyer of in the past of curriculum, I don't care what they call their program. And I don't want to see it as a decision maker, because in most cases, I wouldn't know good curriculum from bad curriculum. I wouldn't know what I'm looking at. I want to know how much it costs, how much time it'll take. I call them meetings, not meetings. I call them training sessions or program sessions, depending again on what they call them within the corporation. If you look at their learning calendar and see what they call them, do they call them sessions or courses? Courses usually are longer programs, and then sessions are the individual events. The club officer roles, I call them the leadership opportunities or the executive board members, depending on if I'm talking about them collectively or singularly. So executive board members within that program. The Distinguished Club Plan is really where they learn strategic planning, or to build, to plan objectives and then fulfill. So I talk about these being critical success factors, or any other relevant term that they use internally. And basically when I'm having this conversation with the person, I actually ask them, what do they call this? Do they call them critical success factors or goals, or how do they refer to their achievements in their strategic plans or their milestones? So those are some of the basic words that I change that is really a paradigm shift for the people there. And particularly for us Toastmasters who speak so unconsciously about all our words. Okay, so I want to stop and see if there's any questions so far about what I've covered, and then I'll go, depending on your time, I can touch on some things that we could get set up in the corporation that would support the Toastmaster program in a different way. Are there any questions?
So hi, Pat. I'm Don. How are you?
Hi, I'm great.
Great. Many organizations have continuing education units or credits that are required for certification. How do you bring that up in the conversation?
Can you explain the context of that? So you're saying that some organizations have continuous learning required?
Yeah, some organizations actually require continuing education units or credits for the certification of their different disciplines or career fields.
Right.
And I'm just curious, do you bring that into the conversation of the value of having a program like this?
You know, if it comes up, really so much of this is based on just having the mindset to meet their needs, and that we have a very valuable product to enroll them in. And I really believe that we always have to have no on the table with our potential sales calls. So we have to be prepared to say, I don't think you're a good fit, or this won't work, or we're not the program for you. But if somebody raised that and I was there in a corporate visit, I'd first of all ask them what that's involved with, and how how many of their programs require communication and leadership to actually support those ongoing education programs. And I would say that Toastmasters program would be a very strong support of continuous internal learning that may even make it easier for people to participate in those ongoing certifications or requirements to keep up their qualifications. Thanks for the question.
Hi, Pat Megan.
Yeah.
Question. Hi. One of the things that corporate America is saying we need to solve is a lack of people who have problem-solving skills. In fact, they're almost saying that it's more important than leadership and communication. How can Toastmasters address that?
Fabulous. I think that how many of you have had to problem solve in your current environment with Toastmasters? Me, I find that there's always problems to solve if there's 2 or more people in the room. And if 2 people are being honest, there's often things to differ about and then problem solve. You know, I think that this is the part of the Toastmasters program that's very powerful in that it's experiential learning. So we don't know what's going to come up each day. So if, for example, I'm the VP of Education in the program, and my responsibility is to schedule the programs and who's participating and doing the experiential learning. Also keeping in mind that I might have a learning chart, learning needs from each of the participants as well. So I'm scheduling that, and 2 people don't show up. I'm in problem solving mode already, and immediately, because I have to resolve the gap between what needs to happen and what potentially is not going to happen. So problem solving also, I believe, comes with agility of the mind and creativity and innovation, and that for me is all hooked into self-trust, self-esteem. And I find that people that have self-esteem and confidence are quicker to step in, promote different ideas, be willing to make suggestions and potentially problem solve than people that are reserved or haven't got the confidence to do that. Confident people don't have to have the right answer necessarily, but are willing to step in. So I would tie the confidence into it. I would tie the ability to express ourselves, the critical thinking and speaking portion. You know, when I joined Toastmasters a long time ago, the motto was for better listening, thinking, and speaking skills. And I think that we still teach critical listening and thinking skills, and those are the precursors to good problem solving. So that's where I would go with that. And I'm interested in what you would say.
Those were great questions or great answers. And as you started listing the things that occur, and to let you know, everybody raised their hand as to who was solving problems. It was
good.
Great. It was almost in unison. There's the mental flexibility workshops. There's the thinking outside the ideas, you know, the brainstorming. A lot of the components that you listed that are precursors to being able to problem solve, we have that in our curriculum. We just need to be able to recognize the needs of the corporation and then apply which of the Toastmasters experiences where we've had that experiential learning can impact those needs, and perhaps, you know, maybe even customize a program. Would it make sense to customize a program, and how would you go about doing that? Is there a process maybe?
Well, I would customize it to a certain degree, but I don't think we should fix something that isn't broken. I think the Toastmasters program certainly serves the world in the way that it's developed, in that it's very set for adult learners, and it's based on adult education principles, and it's sound design and development. I would not fiddle with the curriculum. I would sell the curriculum as it is. But what I would do, and I think is absolutely critical, is that when we go into the corporate world, we change our session or our Toastmaster program agendas. I think we have to realize that if we have the CEO standing in the doorway watching our program, we are doing only those things that are clear, concise, precise, and targeted to the corporate environment. And what did we sell? So I actually put together a proposed agenda in the book when I was looking in some of the places where I've spoken about this and shared documents. The agenda for the corporate session doesn't have Pledge of Allegiance. We don't do Pledge of Allegiance in any program in corporate America, United States, California, Canada, Europe, Asia. We don't do that in a program at work. We don't do a prayer. We do learning objectives. Perhaps we might talk about the purpose of the meeting, of the session. We might say that today we're here to talk about communication and leadership. Again, every session we might reinforce that in opening comments in some way as the chair of the meeting. But they're looking at chairing meetings and organizing that. They're looking at people working as a team. So what I propose is that if you have a quiz master, that's gone. Invocation is gone. Joke is gone. All of the stuff that the CEO becomes the litmus test for. So I'm saying that they're there basically, let's do speaking, prepared speaking and feedback, evaluation, evaluate our evaluators so that they're always improving. Do impromptu speaking or table topics, whatever you choose to call it. And, set that up that's practicing for interview skills, that's for their meetings, that's preparing them when they get called in to do a briefing at the last moment, like make it all relevant. Evaluate the table topics because now they're developing an analytical skills, listening skills, conciseness if they're evaluating 6 speakers in table topics or impromptu speaking. So have a chair of the meeting, have a general evaluator who's actually providing feedback of the whole event, have table topics or impromptu, have your prepared speeches and evaluations. So make it really clean and concise about the main elements. And also, I'm a very, very strong supporter of always having an education session. We have this in my home club. We have 3 minutes. We have an hour meeting and we have 3 minutes every week that's dedicated to a lesson. So somebody needs to present a lesson. And I'm proposing in corporate programs in my proposed agenda was that we do 10 minutes, anywhere from 10 minutes down. At every single meeting, we do an education component because it adds that and we're growing those people faster and more consistently. And once you set up your cycle of what those might be, you can have people come in and do them. You can have people, certainly at the beginning you need to, but later on, even the members or the participants can take over and do some of those. And it's a great opportunity to perhaps your area director when they visit or your division director, if they come in, that they could do that education component. Because there's a huge value in doing that. And so, yeah, I won't go on any more about that, but just take all the fluff out of the, I would still leave grammarian in because we do want to correct people's grammar and expand that. But the rest I would take out. But that's my opinion, and that's what I've done in corporations.
Hi there, my name is Don Dehoff. I love the vision that you presented of a club that has a lot of credibility with their corporation. At my company, our club is known as those people that get together and talk. So how do we go from that reputation and build towards what you're describing?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because that really takes me into the next phase of things that I want to talk about, is that it's about reselling the Toastmaster program to the corporation. And I'm not sure if you currently have what I call a corporate champion, or that main supporter that's in the corporation who is a decision maker, whether they're the head of HR or the head of learning and development, that ensures that Toastmasters program goes in the learning calendar, that it's on HR's radar, that it's put in the new hire packages for any employee that's arriving to get hired. And so that it's the responsibility of HR to make the Toastmaster program available to your employees. It's the responsibility of learning and development to publish and ensure that a minimum of 20 people are in that program all the time. And so it's setting that up. It's going back and saying, here's what we would like to do in order to ensure the longevity of the Toastmasters program. Can we put it in the training program? Can we put it in the cycle of finance so that the money is always available? Can we have regular meetings with you, the contact person, as our champion, to let you know the status of the development of the people, or who would that report go to? Looking at, is it part of the performance review plan or the employee development plans? It can be built into that also. And when it becomes integrated into the fabric, and Toastmasters representatives are only responsible for the delivery of this unique delivery method, then the corporation owns it. And then we're there when the corporation has a need, and when the need is over, we leave. We're not there trying to flog something and make something happen, or require Dawn to run around and find 12 new people. So Dawn goes and finds 12 friends and twists her arm. And then when it gets promoted internally, and there's some recognition internally as well, you get to talk about communication and leadership. Mostly public speaking, and the speaking stuff is created because of us talking about public speaking. And when we talk about communication and leadership training, first of all, we get a different group of people interested. And secondly, they won't make that assumption that you're just getting together to talk. So I know my time is almost out. I probably have 1 minute left, and I probably have a day's left of information I'd love to share with you, because as I said at the beginning, I'm super, super excited about this topic. But I hope that what I've shared with you today is at least gets you thinking, and that that you'll rethink or think differently about corporate programs. And rather than taking a community club and putting it in a corporate environment, recognize that it's critical that we create something different to meet the needs of the corporate they're not. I consider it an honor to be able to talk to you about this, and feel free to pass any questions along. Don't suffer. I know some of the people in your group were at the session, or perhaps have a book and have the details, so feel free to reach out in some way if you need to. I'd be glad to support you.
Thank you.
Is she ready? Pat, I just have a quick question. When it comes to the dues, as far as the company clubs are concerned, is there a difference when the company pays all the money or if the employees pay half?
It's really up to the corporation, in my opinion. Regardless of how they do it, I suggest that they have a learning agreement in place with their employees, just as they may have with any other ongoing learning, is that if I pay for my employee to go, I want to know that they're meeting a certain standard. So when I was in the corporate world, what I did is I created a learning agreement, and I said, my employees, I will pay for you, I will reimburse you is what I did, but I said I will pay, I'll reimburse you, but here's the conditions you need to meet for me to reimburse you. And so I required them to attend 80% of the sessions. And they had to report that to me. I required that they did a minimum of 3 prepared presentations in 6 months, and that they participated in a minimum of 8 to 10, and I can't remember the details of it now, of other supportive roles every 3 months. So I had different requirements that they had to do because of it being experiential. I didn't want them just to have a milestone because they could jump through that, but I wanted them to be actively involved in the program. And the Toastmaster program would deliver results if they were doing the work. And if they could present that they had completed those requirements, then I reimbursed them. And we also had a policy in the corporation where I last worked regarding the time for Toastmasters. So some organizations provide, say, a certain number of hours of training per employee a year. And so I, being employee A, could say, I want to spend all my training hours in Toastmasters this year. And so that in that case, I may get, depending on how many hours, I may get all my Toastmaster meetings covered by work. And if they only covered half of that amount, then I may have to have an agreement with my supervisor of how I pay back that time, whether I work longer hour at the end of the day, whatever it might be. So all of that is very negotiable and on the table with the individual corporations, and they may internally have different agreements with different branches of their organization. So there's, as you can see, there's not one simple answer, but certainly I put it over to them to figure out how they run it, and I'm curious for them to look how they run all their other learning programs. And I want Toastmasters to look like their learning program, not something that's been parachuted in. So hopefully that was helpful.
Pat, I'd like to speak on behalf of my district director, Kathy Donovan. Thank you for attending our DEC meeting. We feel very privileged and honored for your presence, as well as the great information you were able to share and impart onto us today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Beth. Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.